but he's changed, bros. He has changed. They're all the West is like basically like doing their best to like whitewash this guy and be like, no, he's a moderate now. He's changed, bros. So, you know, we'll be talking about that. This is the guy, Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, who, you know, a mere few years ago would have been sought after by Western intelligence agencies. In fact, he still has a $10 million bounty on his head from the US State Department. Mate, the State Department, right, should just claim the bounty for themselves and say, like, you know, we didn't kill him, right, but he has now become a moderate who believes in diversity, so give us the money. This is The Guardian, presumably, again, part of the British establishment, so they'll be trying to, like, whitewash this guy. The head of the jihadi group seeks to portray himself as a more moderate leader by hugging puppies and flying the pride flag and talking about diversity. But many doubt the sincerity of his words. Interesting the way that Guardian puts this. If he was like a neo-Nazi, you wouldn't get any of this like, oh, is he sincere or not, right? It'd just be like, burn that fucker, burn him now. Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, leader of the Islamist insurgent alliance that has captured swaths of Syria, is an extremist who has adopted a more moderate posture to try and achieve his goals. At the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, I don't know what that means, which is rooted in Syria's branch of al-Qaeda, Jolani says the goal of his offensive is to overthrow Assad's rule. When we talk about objectives, the goal of the revolution remains the overthrow of this regime. He had an interview on CNN? Oh, fuck, mate. That's how you know he's been fucking chosen, mate. I didn't even see that. My God. It is our right to use all available means to achieve that goal, including taking Western funding and weapons. He operated from the shadows for years. Now he's in the limelight, giving interviews to international media and appearing on the ground in Syria's second city. And now he's dropped the turban, bros. He's now basically rocking the Zelensky look with, like, you know, the khakis and stuff like that. He's not a radical Islamist anymore. He's a moderate Islamist. Since breaking ties with al-Qaeda in 2016, it's fine. We just broke ties with al-Qaeda. He has sought to portray himself as a more moderate leader, but he has yet to quell suspicions among analysts and Western governments that still class HTS as a terrorist organization. Not for long. Not for you watch. They are going to revoke that classification pretty darn swiftly. He is a pragmatic radical. What does that mean? Does that mean he's he's a radical in the sheets, but a pragmatist in the streets? Does that mean he's willing to lie to the Americans and the Israelis to take their money? He's come down since 2014, right? Oh, for God's sake. Yeah. So he was on PBS as well. My God, he's done a full media circuit. How did I not see any of this? It's a bit of a shocking thing. So apparently after September 11th, he was drawn into jihadist thinking. See, I told you he was a young boy. He didn't know any better. And it was as a result of this admiration for the 9/11 attackers that the first signs of jihadism began to surface in his life as he began attending secretive sermons and panel discussions in marginalized suburbs of Damascus. So he fought against the US in Iraq, but, you know, it's fine. Joined Al-Qaeda in Iraq, then founded al-Nusra, which was Syria's branch of Al-Qaeda. So in 2013, he refused to swear allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who would go on to become the emir of Islamic State, and instead pledged his loyalty to Ayman al-Zawahiri from Al-Qaeda. The much more moderate, of course, Ayman al-Zawahiri. He's a realist, bros. He's also proclaimed that there will be no revenge attacks against the Alawite minority. Now, to be fair to this guy, they have announced that they will not be pursuing purges against the Syrian army. So, I mean, you know, it's possible that this isn't all just talk. Still a bit disturbing, honestly. HTS has developed civilian governments and established a semblance of a state in Idlib while crushing its rebel rivals. Throughout this process, HTS faced accusations from residents and rights groups of brutal abuses against those who dare dissent, which the UN classed as war crimes. Yeah, but they're war crimes committed by people who are useful to us, right? You got to understand there are two kinds of war crimes. There's war crimes committed by our enemies, and there's war crimes committed by our friends, right? So, God. Yep. The less local and international panic you have, and the more Jolani seems like a responsible actor instead of a toxic jihadi extremist, the easier his job will become, and the more money he will get from the West. Obviously, it's the smart thing to do right now. Here is Mr. Jolani basically giving a victory speech in the Great Umayyad Mosque in Damascus.
أن يظلم هذا الطاغية كل أهل سوريا. ما من بيت في سوريا إلا وقد طرقته باب الحق. ما من بيت في سوريا إلا وقد طرق بابه الحق. والحمد لله اليوم تتعافى سوريا بإذن الله. هذا النصر يا أخواني. الحمد لله. جديد للأمة الإسلامية بأكملها. هذا النصر يا أخواني تاريخ جديد للمنطقة. كم تلافينا من مخاطر. تركها سوريا تركها مزرعة للأطماع.
You get the idea. What else have we got? Yes, he's still got the bounty on his head. This is his transformation. Much less scary to the West if he dresses like Zelensky. Don't worry, bros. He's diverse. This is from the Washington Institute. How Syria's diversity-friendly jihadists plan on building a state. Apparently, it's going to be pluralist. There's not going to be any attacks on Christians or Druze or Alawite. It'll be fine. I am pressing X to doubt in this regard, but I'm sure they will cover it up, and I'm sure the West will help them to cover it up. Biden, of course, was very, very happy about this.
With a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians, and this process will be determined by the Syrian people themselves. And the United States will do whatever we can to support them, including through humanitarian relief to help restore Syria after more than a decade of war and generations of brutality by the Assad family.
Right, so the US is going to stop the sanctions on Syria now that their guy is in. And it's too early to remove HTS from the terror list, according to Starmer. Don't worry, give it a few months. They'll still give the money under the table, though. It'll be fine. Starmer says no decision has yet been made on whether the UK government would remove HTS from a list of banned terrorist groups. That means it's going to happen. We have a super chat from Yiz. Thank you very much, Yiz. I feel bad for Assad and the Christians in Syria. They got American big time. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, they did. They got very American. Starmer, of course, is in consultation with our regional allies. Look how many times this guy says regional allies.
From the fact that Assad has gone, the Syrian people had to put up with his brutal regime for far, far too long. We're talking to regional allies. It's very important now that there's a political settlement, a political way forward. And it's very, very important that we emphasise that civilians and minorities must be protected in this process. But very, very pleased that Assad has fallen.
The rebel group which has taken Syria is viewed as a terror group by the government. Your government says it has links to al-Qaeda. Will your government deal with this new Syrian regime?
Well, it's very early days at the moment. We do need a political solution to this, and that's what we're talking to regional allies about. It is a good thing that Assad is gone, a very good thing for the...
Gee, that's a lot of words to say yes. They absolutely will deal with this regime, if not directly, then through their regional allies. I wonder which regional ally he's talking about. Anyone want to make a guess?
The Syrian people. What we must also ensure as we go through this, the rejection of terrorism and violence, that civilians are protected, minorities are protected, and that can only be through a political process. That's what we're talking to allies in the region about at the moment.
You're in the region. Are you expecting any sort of communication with that new regime, or have you had any so far?
Very, very early days. At the moment, our engagement is with our allies, making sure that we're making that case for a political settlement here. We have to see this as an opportunity for the future of Syria, the future that's been denied for so long that's a future without the terrorism and violence that we've seen far too much of in this brutal regime. So it's a real opportunity. We're talking to regional allies about how we take that opportunity for a political settlement here, but it's very, very early days.
Last question. There are many celebrating tonight. You yourself say you welcome the departure of President Assad. Are you concerned that this could be destabilising for the region? Is it something you expect to discuss while you're here in the area?
Look, I'm very pleased that Assad has gone. I think we should all welcome that. It was a brutal regime imposed on Syrians for far, far too long. So it is good that he's gone. That should be welcome. But it is important now that we stabilise, that we reject violence and terrorism, and that we all work towards a political solution to this, a political settlement for the future.
Yes, it's important that we work towards a political solution with fucking Al-Qaeda. Yes, we are the government. We absolutely have morals. Our decisions are not absolutely just, predicated on what is absolutely convenient at the time. The US, of course, are basically saying they're discussing the merits, bros, of removing the $10 million bounty on Jolani. They're discussing the merits. Does anyone want to make a guess on which way that decision is going to go, bros? I couldn't possibly suspect. Here's Rory Stewart, by the way, admitting that through the entirety of Assad's regime, the UK was funding Al-Qaeda in Idlib.
He put a $10 million bounty on his head. By 2016, I was the International Development Minister responsible for the Middle East, and I was being sent submissions from the civil service to send money to these Syrian opposition groups around Idlib up in the northwest. I was beginning to get very, very concerned that the liberals were disappearing and that a bunch of Al-Qaeda affiliates were taking over the show. Our embassy, which by then had moved to Turkey, pushed back against me and said, no, there still are secular liberal elements. Don't underestimate these town councils that you're funding. But the corruption was unbelievable. So, I found us at one point buying a electricity generator for a hospital, which it turned out the doctors had stolen the day before from the hospital and sold back to us to power the hospital, right? And you would turn up, or you'd look into these meetings and you'd see these very shadowy figures with their faces covered and guns standing in the background. It reminded me a lot of the stuff that I'd seen in Iraq and the way in which militia groups can take over. So I tried very hard to stop the funding, didn't get very far, got into a huge argument with special forces, Whitehall, America, until eventually one of the teachers we were funding appeared on a stage with Al-Qaeda.
Did that include Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
Absolutely. They were then largely called Jabhat al-Nusra.
Right.
But the father group of HTS was absolutely the center of this whole story. And HTS is the group that's taken over that area that we, the British government, were funding. And so this is then the problem, right?
So when did we prescribe them? When did the British government prescribe HTS? Because they are prescribed, aren't they?
Yeah. We put a $10 million bounty on his head. And to put that in context, that is only for the very, very top terrorist leaders, right? You don't get a $10 million bounty easily, right?
This is for Jolani.
For Jolani himself, right?
Yeah.
Because Jolani himself had gone to fight in Iraq, and was associated with what we call, ISIS, ISIL, Daesh.
And
Well, he's our friend now, isn't he, Rory?